Hi everyone, I'm Alpha66, and that was an incredible transfer window, wasn't it? One of the best I've seen for quite some time, and especially in the Premier League. We're about to have a brilliant season in the Prem. So, upon that, let's completely flip the mood. Today I'm going to take a look at every Premier League club and pick out their worst ever transfer window. I already know I'm going to traumatise a couple fans. Right, let's go. Arsenal, summer 2011. If you wanted any more clues that Arsene Wenger was having a midlife crisis at Arsenal, this was the biggest one. Yes, a bigger clue than letting Lionel Messi smashed 4 goals past us, worse than the time we were smashed 8-2 at Old Trafford, and even worse than the day he decided to sanction the signing of Yaya Sanogo, and that does take some beating. Arsenal made almost €80 million in player sales in the summer of 2011, with the big departures being Gael Clichy and Samir Nasri to Man City and Cesc Fabregas to Barcelona. Just those three made €70 million combined, and with that money, Arsenal chose to reinvest it on walking bin bags. The players that came in were an 18-year-old Alex Oxlade-Chamberlain, the forehead with arms and legs that was Gervinho, Andre Santos, a left-back who couldn't tell the difference between orange juice and bleach, Yossi Benayoun on loan, a 19-year-old Joel Campbell, Carl Jenkinson, another fullback who was about as useful as a bike made of sticks, Ju Young Park, a guy who, had he not become a footballer, would probably now be found on the border of North and South Korea, holding a semi-automatic. Honestly, judging off of how good he was on the football pitch, I wouldn't trust him carrying a chair, let alone an assault rifle. And then on deadline day, in came Per Mertesacker and Mikel Arteta, the only half-decent signings of the window. Aston Villa, summer 2015. Villa fans, any of you shocked? Well, out goes star striker Christian Benteke to Liverpool, a guy who'd go on to be anything but a star striker, Fabian Delph to Man City, Matt Lowton to Burnley, and Shay Given to Stoke. And in comes Jordan Amavi, Adama Traore, Rudy Gested, Scott Sinclair, Joleon Lescott, Mark Bunn, and Micah Richards. I'm not sure how Villa fans managed to survive that season watching Lescott and Richards in their defence every week. It's like sitting through 90 minutes of watching a spider eat itself. And I know they did sign Idrissa Gana Gueye and Jordan Veretout, but they only came good after they left Villa Park. And you know this window was dreadful, and after this, Villa finished bottom of the league on 17 points. 17! Embarrassing. Bournemouth, summer 2021. I don't like having to dip into the lower leagues for these, but here I have to. With Bournemouth looking to win promotion back to the Premier League, they sold Arnaut Danjuma to Villarreal for a big bad €23.5 million and reinvested it on Ryan Christie and Jamal Lowe. Jamal Lowe was quite good for them that season, but Ryan Christie was quite mid. And then in came a load more loan deals and free transfers. Emiliano Marcondes, Robbie Brady and Orjan Nyland came in on frees, useless. And then Leif Davis and Morgan Rogers came in on loan, more useless. But that's not me saying that Rogers is a terrible player. He's a great prospect, but while at Bournemouth, no, he was not good. Brentford, summer 2024. Not going to go back too far for Brentford, because do I really need to? I know Sepp van den Berg came in and he's been quite good, but still, they also spent €12 million on forgotten Brazilian winger Gustavo Nunes, and then the worst two, €23.4 million on Fabio Carvalho, and €33 million on Igor Thiago, a guy who clearly has hamstrings made of cheesecake. Brighton, January 2018. In Brighton's first ever Premier League season, they must have thought that they had done good transfer business in January that season. But no, obscure players from random leagues as always, but these ones were terrible. Brought in were Jurgen Locadia, a striker who'd go on to score 3 goals in 35 games over the next 18 months, and Victor Gyökeres. I know he's about to become the best player in Premier League history, but still, his spell at Brighton was an absolute stinker. And also Leonardo Ulloa, a pointless loan deal. Well, they did survive relegation that season, so fair play. Still a terrible January window for them. Burnley, summer 2018. There were a couple to choose from here for Burnley. January 2022 and summer 2020 come close, but instead I'm going to pick summer 2018, where Burnley looked to make their squad even better after miraculously qualifying for the Europa League the previous season. And they did that by signing Ben Gibson, Mate Vidra, Naki Wells, and a past-it Joe Hart, a guy who at that stage of his career, all he could offer the Burnley team was a free bottle of Head and Shoulders. Chelsea, summer 2022. Jesus Christ, I could be here all day with Chelsea. Summer 2017 was about as successful as a trip to the shop with your alcoholic granddad. You know all you're going to walk out with is 6 crates of Corona. And going back 10 years, summer 2007 was also an embarrassing pile of sludge. I should hope whoever functioned the sale of Steve Sidwell has since had a pool table dropped on his head, but instead I'm going to go for summer 2022, where Todd Boehly showed the world that he was nothing more than a clown with loads of money. Star centre-backs Antonio Rudiger and Andreas Christensen left on free transfers, and in came... oh god... How long have you got? Kalidou Koulibaly, Raheem Sterling, Carney Chukwuemeka, Pierre-Emerick Aubameyang, Gabriel Slonina, Cesare Casadei, Dennis Zakaria, Wesley Fofana and Marc Cucurella for a combined fee of €297 million. Fofana cost 80 million, Sterling cost 56 million and Cucurella cost 65 million. And he's the only player in that list that's actually turned out half decent. And even then he's not been worth anywhere near 65 million euros. And to make matters worse, in January they spent another 300 million euros, making an absolute mockery of financial fair play and finished 12th in the Premier League, turning into Crystal Palace for a season. The biggest embarrassment I've seen Chelsea pull off since they lost 4-2 to Bradford in 2015. That's like losing to Stephen Hawking in a 200-metre sprint. Crystal Palace, January 2018. Like Brighton, Crystal Palace's worst transfer window was January 2018, and quite similar to their somehow rivals, they brought in a bunch of forgotten players. Yaroslav Yak and Erdal Rakip were brought in. If you've ever heard of either of these players, leave a like. And one of Palace's worst ever signings, Alexander Sorloth. But like Gyökeres, he's had a failed Premier League stint and gone off elsewhere and turned himself into a fantastic striker. He was being linked with Real Madrid a couple years ago. Wouldn't get too carried away though, this was the same club that was sniffing around Murillo last summer, a Nottingham Forest defender. It's like finding Mr Beast in the perfume aisle at Boots. Everton, summer 2017. So, Ronald Koeman had just finished 7th in the league with Everton. Ronald Koeman should have built an even better squad to kick on and possibly push for Europe. But why do that when you can sell Romelu Lukaku and spend 50 million euros on Gylfi Sigurdsson, a guy who you should never let anywhere near a grassroots football game, 27 million on Davy Klaassen, lunacy, 10 million on Nikola Vlasic, anyone remember him? Bring back an old Wayne Rooney, a guy who at that stage of his career probably had 6 donuts as his pre-match meal, and 2 of the worst signings in Everton history, Cuco Martina from Southampton and, oh god, Sandro Ramirez from Malaga, a striker who'd gone to score 1 goal in 16 games over the next 2 years. This guy was signed when they could have signed, believe it or not, Erling Haaland. That's like turning down Ariana Grande and instead choosing to ask out the spider in the corner of your room. And yes, there is one, go check. No wonder Koeman was sacked in October. Well, to be fair, they did sign Jordan Pickford and Michael Keane that window, so it wasn't entirely terrible, but it was still pretty terrible. Fulham, summer 2018. Well, summer 2025 is worth a mention. Right up until the final days of August, Fulham's only transfer activity was spending 500k on backup goalie Benjamin Lecomte. I'm guessing Fulham fans were so bored watching that, they probably spent all that time experimenting what happens if you put your hands in a toaster. This summer could end up on here for Fulham in a couple years time, but instead I'm going to go back 7 years to summer 2018. Fulham had just been promoted from the Championship into the Prem and were spending loads. 12 players came in. Particular lowlights include Fabry, John Michael Siri, Alfie Mawson, Maxime Lamarcand and Luciano Vietto. Well, they did bring players like Joe Bryan, Alexander Mitrovic and Zambo Anguissa through the door, but they only came good after they returned to the Championship, which happened that exact same season. They only spent 6 weeks of the season outside the relegation zone and were relegated at the beginning of April, finishing with just 26 points. Big bad underachievement. Leeds, summer 2014. Leeds have had some awful moments in the transfer market. John Kevin Augustin says hello, but it is hard to screw up worse than how they did in the summer of 2014. After surviving in the Championship mainly thanks to the goals of Ross McCormack, he was then sold to Fulham for 11.8 million euros. And to reinvest that money, they bought a bunch of players that I doubt even Leeds fans will remember. Kasper Sloth, Tommaso Bianchi, Suleiman Dakara, Adrian Zambenedicic, Dario Del Fabro, Giuseppe Belushi and Marco Silvestri. It's like the year 11s hearing all the names of the New Year 7s. Who the f*** are they? Liverpool, summer 2010. Imagine if this summer ends up a disaster for Liverpool. I, for one, would find it hilarious if Alexander Isak goes on to flop in a Liverpool shirt and ends up at West Ham by next year. But I need a definite answer, so let's go for summer 2010, where Roy Hodgson showed about as much composure in the transfer market as my sister on ice skates. After this window, I wouldn't be surprised if all Liverpool fans were sent to care homes, staring wide-eyed at the floor, shivering, looking like they'd just seen Susan Ball take a shit. The players that came in, oh god. Christian Poulsen, a teenage John Joe Shelby, Brad Jones, Paul Konchesky, Milan Jovanovic, Joe Cole, Danny Wilson and Raul Morales. To the traumatised Scouser watching this, don't think I don't know you're here. Just please don't blame me when your wife asks why she's come home to you unconscious on the kitchen floor.
Sorry.
Man City, summer 2012. Summer 2021 is worth a mention, purely because of that laughable transfer fee for Jack Grealish, but they did sign legendary goalie Scott Carson in that transfer window, and that more than makes up up for it. Instead, let's go back 9 years to summer 2012. With Man City looking to strengthen their side after winning the league, not one signing helped them actually do that. In came Scott Sinclair and Jack Rodwell, nowhere near good enough, an ancient Richard Wright, Javi Garcia, Matej Nastasic and Maicon, a lad who would probably have kept his dignity had he retired after that one night he came up against Gareth Bale. Man United, summer 2023. Again, I could be here all day with Man United. Summer 2021, summer 2020, January 2018, summer 2015, summer 2009. Which one do you want? I wouldn't blame you for leaving a comment saying that I'm wrong about this one, but give me a break, it's Man United. Of course there's going to be 1,000 embarrassments to choose from. I've picked summer 2023 because not one player they signed that window turned out any good, and the money they spent as well was absolutely ridiculous. 77 million euros on Rasmus Højlund, 67 million on Mason Mount, 50 million on Andre Onana, you know that goalie with wrist made of cheese, Sofian Amrabat and Sergio Reguilon on loan. Their United spells will turn out to be nothing more than a quiz question, and 5 million euros on Altay Bayindir. Two goalies who you could replace with a one-legged badger, and that'd be more effective. Newcastle, January 2005. The furthest we've had to go back yet. To be honest, since the takeover, Newcastle's transfer business has been quite solid. Well, last summer they pissed about with PSR and had to spend 20 million euros on Odysseas Vlachodimos. The most they'd ever spent on a goalie, and he's played 45 minutes for Newcastle since, and been sent on loan to Sevilla. But other than that, solid. So let's pick January 2005, where Graham Souness caused most Geordies to start lighting fire to their fingernails as a coping mechanism. Fan favourites Olivier Bernard and Craig Bellamy left, and with their defence not looking strong, to fix it they brought three of the worst defenders in not just Newcastle history, but Premier League history. Celestine Babayaro, Amdi Faye and Jonathan Boomsong. I'm not sure how to describe how bad they all were. Let's just say that their brand of defending would make Alex Murphy look like Newcastle's version of prime Tony Adams. Signing those three, it's like building a house and using chewing gum to stick the bricks together. Nottingham Forest, summer 2022. This is why a promoted team should not sign everyone with 2 feet and a working pulse. In this window, Forest signed 23 players. 23! There's crazy transfer windows, then there's Chelsea, and then there's that. There should not be that. In all fairness, there were some decent signings in there. Morgan Gibbs-White, Taiwo Awoniyi, Oral Mangala, Musa Niakate and Nico Williams were probably the best of the lot. But aside from that, oh lord. Emmanuel Dennis, Remo Freuler, Renan Lodi, Julian Biancone, Lewis O'Brien, Harry Toffolo, Omar Richards, Wayne Hennessy, and the worst signing that a newly promoted club has ever made, Big Jesse Lingard. Signed to pocket 200k a week on the bench, no doubt devouring a pot of Ben & Jerry's every game. And that's not even all the signings they made that summer. Image on screen now of every player they signed that summer. And you know it's bad because they stayed up by just 4 points that season. Sunderland, January 2018. So, Sunderland had just been relegated from the Premier League and immediately found themselves battling relegation in the Championship. So to try and save them, Chris Coleman brought in Kazenga Lualua, Lee Camp, Ashley Fletcher, Connor Shields, Ovi Ajaria and Jake Clark-Salter. No wonder they were relegated again 4 months later. Tottenham summer 2008. This summer was rough for Spurs fans, and you couldn't blame them for puking into their coffee the moment that they saw their deadly strike force of Dimitar Berbatov and Robbie Keane sold. And then to think that Roman Pavlyuchenko was a good replacement for Berbatov was absolutely ridiculous. The other players that came in, Giovanni Dos Santos, a Mexican who was supposed to be the next Ronaldinho playing for Spurs, Pirello Gomez, Vedran Corluka, David Bentley, Fraser Campbell and John Bostock, a player who Tottenham were involved in a legal battle for. How stupid does that look now that he plays for non-league side Solihull Moors, where his teammates are definitely all part-time florists. West Ham, summer 2016. This was absolutely dreary. The 2015-16 season was great for the Hammers. They only lost 8 games. They only lost against the top 6 side once, against Tottenham in November. They beat Arsenal, reigning champions Chelsea, Man United, Man City and Liverpool twice, and qualified for the Europa League. What a way to say goodbye to the Berlin ground. Then in their first summer at the new London Stadium, they embarrassed themselves in the transfer market again. Beside Manuel Lanzini and Arthur Masuaku, who were decent signings, they brought in Havard Nordtveit, Sofiane Feghouli, Tony Martinez, Edmilson Fernandez, Gökhan Toure, and the worst two, 24 million euro flop Andre Ayew and Simone Zaza on loan. If you buy tickets to a football match that are for the seats right at the top of the stadium, you'd expect to be safe from the balls flying over the bar, right? You are safe, unless unless Simone Zaza's taken a penalty. Wolves, summer 2020. Wolves were playing really well in the Prem between 2018 and 2020, with a side full of young Portuguese talent, but in 2020 they did not do well bringing in any more of it. Out went Diogo Jota to Liverpool, rest in peace, Helder Costa to Leeds, and Matt Doherty to Spurs. There were some good signings. Nelson Semedo, Ryan Aït-Nouri and a young Totti all came in, but apart from that, Matthias Sarkic from Aston Villa, rest in peace again, Diana Hueva from Liverpool, Marcel from Lyon, and 2 signings from Porto. Vitinha, yes, in 2020 he couldn't crack it at some club with John Ruddy on the bench, and the worst signing that Wolves have ever made, Fabio Silva for €40 million. Useless. So that's the end of the video. How many of you have I traumatised just by reminding you of those terrible windows? Or have I actually got any of them right? I don't know. Let me know in the comments. If you enjoyed the video, remember to like, subscribe so you don't miss an upload, and I'll see you in the next video.